Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. The heart behind this podcast is to encourage and equip you to discover your God-given purpose by sharing talks with people blazing trails right where they are. Each week, you'll hear from me and different guests on the show to talk about life, purpose, God, leadership, and a whole lot in between. I love having conversations with people, and I'm excited to get to bring you into those. My hope is that you'll grow and become poised for purpose. I hope each week that you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. You guys, I'm so excited for this week's guest. It's my friend Rachel Awtrey. She's an online encourager and podcaster, and she spends most of her time connecting with her friends online, encouraging them to seek Jesus in small and large ways. She's also the host of the Behind the Bliss podcast, which creates space for women to share stories and the reality of what life is really like behind the bliss. I know today's conversation is going to bless you. I've known Rachel for a few years now, and every time we get to hang out, I always leave super encouraged. She talks about a lot of different things in her story today, and I know that it will encourage you in whatever season you're in, whether you're in a waiting season or you find yourself in a really good season. I know that this episode's going to encourage you. So let's get into my conversation with Rachel. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so glad to, one, get to catch up with you, but two, just to have you on the podcast. I know the listeners are going to be so excited to hear from you. So just in case someone doesn't know who you are, what you do, tell listeners a little bit about yourself.
Court, I'm so excited to be here. This is a treat for me too. I love chatting with friends on the phone, and that's basically what this is. It's like a recorded phone conversation. So fun. My name is Rachel Awtrey. I love life. Like literally life is so fun, especially when you do it with Jesus. So I love encouraging other women to love the life that they're living through an online platform on Instagram, and then take conversations a little bit deeper on my podcast called Behind the Bliss podcast, where we have women from all different walks of life share a little expert advice from corners that they might be living in and things that they might be walking through. And it is the biggest honor of my life. Besides being a wife, I'm also a military wife. So I live that lifestyle. If any of you guys listening are military wives, you just know we have a special place in our hearts for each other. Currently, I am in Mississippi living on an Air Force base while my husband, Thomas, is in Air Force pilot training. And it's been a really fun ride. But that's a Spark Notes version of me and who I am and what I do with my time. But really, like I said before, like I love Jesus and I love this life, and it's not always fun, but there's really cool things that you can do along the way, even in the midst of discomfort. So I hope to be able to share a little bit of those with y'all today.
I love following Rachel. She always brings so much encouragement and wisdom. And I know you mentioned the podcast Behind the Bliss. Tell us a little bit more, like what's the story behind the podcast? And a little bit more about your heart behind the show, because I know you have a tagline of like being met in your mess, which I love. And I also have your mug, which I drink coffee from all the time. It's my favorite.
I loved seeing your order come through. I was like, hey, it's our girl Courtney. Behind the Bliss actually started as a fun project between a great friend and I. Her name's Mary Scott Mercer. It would not be what it is today without her, so I always have to give her a plug. She's one of my best friends, and we both were in really interesting seasons of life. She was a military wife at this point, and my husband had a really interesting job that took us out to California every summer. So we lived half the year out there, half the year in Birmingham, and it just got nuts. Like it got to a point where we both needed a purpose more so than just being like a supportive role in life. And so she was like, what if we started a podcast? And I was like, at that point I didn't listen to podcasts. So I was like, I don't even know what this would look like. And really, transparently, I only listened to crime podcasts, like Crime Junkies. So she was like, we should start a podcast. I was like, I don't know any criminal stories. I don't know what we would do. She's like, Rachel, like there's so many other kinds of podcasts that I think this world needs. And we have lots of really cool stories to share. We have amazing friends with great stories to share. This would just be a fun platform. So fast forward, we said yes. And we jumped in and started what we thought was going to be a fun summer project back in, I believe, 2017. And it has turned into a community today of women that, our goal is to meet you in your mess, because life can get real messy and uncomfortable, but that doesn't have to be the end all be all. And to remind people Jesus has the final word. and our stories are already written. So instead of like, being grouchy and sitting in the corner being angry about it, like how can we rise to the occasion, put purpose to our pain, and say yes anyways, even when it doesn't seem easy. So we do that. And Mary Scott is now, I get to call her 100% my best friend. She used to be 50% business partner, 50% best friend. And now she, ever since, kind of has stepped away, and Behind the Bliss is just me. And I have some other amazing girls on my team that help me. So I have to give shout outs to Becca and Carly. But as far as like hosting it goes, you'll find me behind the mic, which is so fun.
I love the podcast, and there's been so many encouraging conversations that have helped me along the way too, like different conversations about waiting seasons or just like transitional seasons, because I think we've all gone through those kinds of seasons. But I love getting to listen in and just, I don't know, it feels like you're sitting down with like friends, because it's just so like casual, fun conversation. Good. And it doesn't feel like, some podcasts like you go to it specifically for like, this is how you do this, this, and this. But like, it literally makes you feel like you're sitting down for a cup of coffee with a friend whenever you're like going through something hard, which I love.
Perfect. I'm like, join us on our virtual couch. We're just going to have a blast and drink coffee together. Yeah.
Well, you also have like a platform for, I don't know if influencing is the right word. I feel like that's what everyone calls it, but it feels more than that for you. On Instagram, where you share all your favorites, your favorite foods, just kind of life encouragement, all kinds of things. And I know that you've been doing that for a while now. And as you've moved, you've kind of taken everybody along your journey and along your life journey too. What is that like for you? Because I know we hear the term influencer a lot today, but for your platform, it feels like it's more than just being a traditional influencer. It's, you're like a friend to your followers.
That's so sweet.
Tell us about that space, and tell us kind of how you got into that and like your story with that.
Yeah, I love my Instagram friends. Y'all rock if you're listening. I have a blast on Instagram, and like people hate on the whole influencer thing, and you can call me whatever you want. But at the end of the day, I just want to be an encouragement online. And if that is to share a sweatshirt that's like way discounted and is the coziest thing ever and is going to be great for that time of the month, like I'll be your girl. If it is something I find at Trader Joe's that like was not worth it, I will let you know. Like I just want to be the friend that you actually can connect with, and I can make myself and my story available. I think Instagram's great, right? Because we can connect with people that we would never meet in person. How beautiful is that? But a lot of times too, I think that there's like a false sense of connection. Like you feel like you know someone, but again, like you've never met them before. So I'm trying to draw the bridge between we might not ever meet, and I can't be your real life friend. I really wish I could to everybody, but I can't be that with my boundaries. You deserve more than what I could be for that. But how can I meet you in the middle to help you maybe feel confident enough to reach out to somebody and make a friendship in real life if you're missing that connection, or to show you what real friendship looks like. And that is more than just talking about sales. That's talking about fun things, hard things, in between things. It's talking about what Thomas and I are up to this weekend, because that's what we would normally do on the phone if we were friends. So yeah, I just kind of, it's funny, whenever I jump on stories, I just feel like I'm FaceTiming people, except I just don't get to see everybody else's face. It's just mine. But yeah, I think the term influencer is really actually neat. And I don't hate it as much as people think people would, only because we're all influencers in some way or another. We're all shaping the society that we're living in. We're all contributing something, whether we want to believe it or not, whether you have one follower or thousands of followers. Like you really are influencing and shaping who somebody's going to be. So I see that as a responsibility and an honor. And I want to make sure that whatever I'm putting out there, I hope, I pray often that's actually helpful and is doing people more service than discouragement.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think I actually followed you before I ended up meeting you, but I randomly met you through Mary Scott. So it's funny. So it's like, I followed you on Instagram, but then I met Mary Scott at a conference, and then she connected me to you, and then we like became real life friends. But you genuinely do like meet that kind of middle ground that you just talked about, because I know like you share fun recipes and stuff that I make your egg roll in a bowl recipe all the time. It's one of my go-to favorites.
Love that stuff. Yes.
But you also share like a lot of really good encouragement too, which I feel like is so needed in that like online space, because there's just so much out there now. And so I feel like it's always good to have like a safe space where like you can go and be encouraged. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. There is like this weird pressure too of like, you're either faith-based or you're not, right? And it's like, you have to pick. It's like, are you just going to share Bible verses with people and encourage people to read their Bible and choose a life with Jesus? Or are you just going to be a quote unquote traditional influencer and have like mirror selfies in your Abercrombie outfit? And I'm like, I think we could be both, right? Like, I think there's space to show people like saying yes to Jesus does mean dropping everything. But at the same time, like, life can be fun. Like Jesus had a blast on earth. So like, how can we live a life of both and while also living an edifying life? But I don't know. I just felt like there was that gap that we're talking about, and you can do both. And that's what I like to do. So that means so much that you would say that, because that, so
yeah, no, I think it's so important to do both, because that's how our life is, you know, like when you become a Christian, I mean, you shouldn't just go be friends with only Christians and only show up in like the only place you ever go is just like those spots. Like, I think you show up in every area. You go to the grocery store, you have fun with friends, you know, go through life moments like having a baby or getting married or whatever. So I feel like it's only appropriate that space should be able to encompass all of it and share that plus encouragement. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody who maybe is hesitant to get started, or they've been wanting to kind of get in that space of like influencing or podcasting or kind of this online stuff that you and I both do? Like, what would you encourage them with if they're just starting out?
I would first say, find out who you're serving. I think that it's like so easy just to jump in because you're so excited about like getting your brand together, like picking your fonts and your colors and like taking pictures, and all those are really important. But I also find it like anytime someone comes to me and is like, hey, I love the space you're in, I want to join that space too, what would you suggest? I always say, why? Like, why do you want to be here? And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I really want to quit my day job, or it's I really feel called to it. And I'm like, okay, we need more. Like, we need a bigger reason. You need a person you're showing up for. You need a girl that you're doing this for. So my biggest suggestion for anyone wanting to jump into this space is know your person. And those days that get really hard, or there's trolls on the internet that try and pick you apart, you can remember like, no, I'm showing up for her. And I have to still show up for her. Again, it becomes a responsibility that's bigger than you. And anything that's bigger than you is, I think, carried differently than when it is about you. And there's so much noise on the internet now too, right? And I think that noise comes from a place of people wanting to be heard and understood. And so they're just like word vomiting them, like all about themselves. And I'm like, I think if what you want is to serve people, then you must figure out who you're serving and how you're going to serve them, instead of just jump in because you're so excited about this life that looks glamorous, because it might not always be and it might change. But as long as you know who you're serving and how you're going to serve them, really you're kind of set up for success regardless of what it looks like. But it definitely needs to be a first step.
I think that that's such good advice, because I know I've heard the saying, like, if you lose your why, you lose your way. Mm-hmm. And so knowing who that person is that you want to speak to or serve, like that's your why. Like your why it's kind of two parts, but it always encompasses a person too, because that's who your audience is. So I think that's such good advice to remember, because I think so many people, just like you said, want to be heard and just want to get their stuff out there and everything. But I think it can get really overwhelming really quickly and feel kind of like burnout or a burden if you don't know who it is that you're serving, or you don't really have like a purpose for like what it is that you're wanting to do with it. And I think that gives it purpose by knowing who you're speaking to.
And scripture says like those without vision will perish. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you don't have vision, it's going to be hard for this dream or idea or goal or whatever to be fueled by something. But when you have vision, you have a reason why you're waking up and doing it, it means something different. It feels different. You could tell. It looks different to other people even too.
Mm-hmm. And I also know like you are multi-passionate in the different things that you do with the podcast and then, you know, the influencing stuff. How do you kind of navigate doing all those different things or those passions and like what you've made into kind of your career? Because I know you also, I don't know if you still do it, but I know you used to do graphic design and kind of marketing type of stuff too. So how do you kind of navigate having these different passion points and also kind of wrapping it into what you do as a whole?
Yeah, great question. So I would say like every season looks different for everyone, right? So like I love being multi-passionate because there's so many different things I love to show up for. And so I'm learning that like every season I'm saying yes and no to different things, revisiting things, pivoting things. If 2020 and the pandemic taught me anything, it's that pivots in the dictionary. So all I can think about is like Ross and Friends, like pivot with the couch up the stairwell. Like that was me all of 2020. Like, how am I going to make this work? And so being multi-passionate is a gift. And I think honestly, if we all dig deep, we've all been made to be multi-passionate people. Hopefully there's not just one thing that lights you on fire, right? Like there's typically going to be more if you sit down and took a second to think about it. But the cool thing is going back to even like what I was saying earlier about knowing who you're serving and why you're serving that person. A lot of times all your passions end up having one similarity, right? So like I love joining people on the podcast, recording episodes, like love writing blogs. And honestly, it's like a personal journal online for me. Love taking pictures of like me and my family. And I like, if you start writing down like all the things that I like to do, a lot of the reasons why I like to do them are because they all lead back to one specific why. And so this for me is I love to serve people and show them, like I said in the beginning, like life can be so beautiful even in the midst of tragedy. In the midst of chaos, there is clarity. In the midst of noise, like there is stillness and quiet to be found. And so if I can share these things, or if I can help unclutter someone else's life, or redo a logo for someone, and I'm like, look, like this could be so much more beautiful. Or in some seasons it's showing up for the podcast and showing the light out of the brokenness in someone's story, like that's my why. And so I'd say like, I think there's a lot of times shame of being multi-passionate. People are like, figure it out. Like, what is it going to be? And I'm like, what if there's not just one answer? Like, what if it's multiple, and that's okay. I think as long as the problem you're solving isn't changing, but the way you're solving it changes. And that's just the way life goes. So I right now say yes to the podcast. And like I was saying earlier, I'm online on Instagram. And then who knows what life will look like even when this comes out. Like it might look different for me, but that's what I feel called to say yes to now. And I think we have to be able to be adaptable and be flexible, changing our how without having to change our why. Mm-hmm. And I think being multi-passionate isn't all too shabby.
Yeah, I think that's really good that you say that too, because I think it does sometimes get a bad rap, or we hear so much like pick a niche, like niche down and all this stuff. But I think, like you said, if you can get to the heart of the matter and everything kind of, it's like all these different roads lead to one kind of pathway. It's like they all end up converging, and it's like, okay, here's why I'm doing like all these different things. And like you said, different seasons, there's different things that you maybe pick up. And sometimes there's seasons where there's things that you put down. And I know that, and that's like okay to try different things. And like you said, right now, maybe you're focused on the podcast. I know you also do some like group coaching too, where you get to really pour into girls. And so like maybe that season is more focused on that, where sometimes it's more focused on like doing a logo or something like that. But it doesn't mean that one of those things isn't your calling. It all kind of goes together.
Yeah. I think it's also, it's so important with why we're called to daily spend time with the Lord, because I think he wants to reveal things new to us every day. And that's where obedience comes into play. So when he was like, Rachel, like, branding and graphics projects like aren't for you anymore. Like I want to create more margin in your life for you to grow, expand, or focus on fill in the blank. Like I could say yes to that because I was in tune with it. And I think if we just picked one thing, right? And like, we're so good at that one thing. Like, that's so beautiful. But chances are, even inside that one thing, there's going to be several different things that continue to change, and we have to monitor and adjust. And I think having the bravery to feel the freedom to monitor and adjust and pivot, like I was saying, it gives, honestly, it takes the pressure off of you, and it puts the ownership back in the hands of the Father. And we're just stewards. We're just managers. We're not owners. So if we're like, hey, how do I manage this well today? And he says, today actually looks like this instead of that, then we need to be okay saying yes. And easier said than done. But I do love to say that too, because your niche, like your people you're serving, why you're serving them, again, doesn't have to change, but the ways that you're serving them totally can, season to season, and they should, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about stewarding, because I feel like sometimes that's where we get a bit off track, is feeling like it's either all on us or it's something we're making, but really everything we are doing as Christians is to glorify God, and we are just the stewards of it. So I think that's really awesome. And that kind of leads into my next question that I had for you, working for yourself, kind of like a typical day in the life. Because I'm sure some people who want to work for themselves are kind of like, what in the world does that look like? And I know this season is a little different too, because I'm sure you're nesting, getting ready for baby boy to come in March. But what does like kind of like typical days look like for you with doing the podcast, working for yourself? Kind of how do you figure out your schedule and that kind of thing?
That is a funny and timely question, because yes, every day right now looks so different, because right now we are preparing for maternity leave. And so I can really just give my family my first focus and take some time off, but then revisit and obviously pick this back up in the summertime. So right now, you ask what a typical day looks like. I am behind this microphone, feels like 24/7, having really good conversations. I'm like looking at my calendar. I have 9 interviews this week. Next week, I have 8. And then the next few weeks just look like logistics for getting things done. So day to day, because I'm multi-passionate, I end up what's called time blocking. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but it's like where instead of, answering emails and then hopping in and recording a podcast and then going and taking a picture for a campaign and whatever. Like, it doesn't make sense to do it that way, because chances are, if you guys saw me right now, I'm like in leggings and my Uggs and like no makeup. And that's how I like to record. But I can't go and take campaign pictures like that, So like, I try and figure out things that have to get done throughout the week, and then what similarities each of them have. So I love to record podcasts back to back to back, because I will be talkative and in a good peppy mood. And then by the end of the day, I'm just like out of words. But then there's other days that are just shoot days. So like, I get ready and have the inspiration for the shoots that I need to do, like pictures or campaigns, and I get those done. So I hate this answer to your question. I wish I had something like, I have a beautiful morning routine and whatever, but I'm just going to give it to y'all real. Like, that's not what it looks like every day around here. This morning I had a morning routine, but tomorrow morning I probably won't, because my first interview is at 9. So every day looks different. I, just as much as you, probably wish I had more of a routine. But with that, I actually was able to get on podcast episode and sit down with Rebecca Lyons, and she is queen of rhythms. And so I'm realizing like there's a difference between rhythms and routines. So like routines is like at 9 o'clock, you do this. At 10 o'clock, we do that. On Tuesdays, we do fill in the blank. But rhythms are like, okay, how is my heart? Do I need a break? If I need a break, like let's go for a walk, and figuring out like what rhythms can I have in my life to make things easier, more systems. So on days that I have lots of interviews, like tomorrow, I'll sit down with my husband, Thomas, tonight, and we'll chat through like, this is what my day looks like. That's what your day looks like. Let's plan on takeout. Who's ordering it? Who's picking it up? Like, let's have a chill night. Let's go, like, make sure I have a walk planned at some point tomorrow. So that's just right now. I'm like, hopefully later I'll have a better plan to share with you guys right now. And that doesn't happen.
No, but I think that that's good though, because I feel like, again, Instagram can make us feel like, oh, everyone gets up and has this perfect morning if they work for themselves and they just have like, all this free time to just do whatever. But if you do work for yourself, you have to have that discipline to actually get stuff done. And I think that time blocking is a good way to do it. And that was part of why I wanted to ask that question, because I know it looks different for everyone and it looks different in different seasons. But I feel like, everyone has to figure out what works for them. But I feel like that gives like a good picture of, just because you see like this perfect stuff on Instagram of like, oh, I've got my coffee and my Bible and everything. Like people are still doing work and they're still kind of getting in the groove of things. And everyone doesn't have like a perfect, routine down pat just because it seems like it. So I think that takes pressure off of other people who want to either work for themselves or who maybe are listening and do work for themselves to kind of have that freedom to figure out what routine works for you. And I'll be sure to link that episode with Rebecca Lyons on your podcast, because I listened to it and it was really, really helpful talking about rhythms.
Yeah, I loved it. The other thing I would say too is like, there's, especially when you're working for yourself, you have to report in different areas at different times of day, right? So like in the mornings, it's me and Jesus. In the day, it's me working, and I honor a lunch break and I spend time with my husband on our lunch break. And then I go back to working and then I have to clock out. And I think that too, like like I was saying, there are rhythms, but the times that you've blocked to work are going to look different, if that makes sense. And so that's something I wish I would have known before I was working for myself, is that I now manage my time. And like, I now have to like make sure I take a lunch break. Like it is legal to take lunch breaks. Like you could do that.
Yes.
And hey, like 15s are a thing at normal work. Like if people get 30-minute breaks, hour breaks, lunch breaks, whatever. Like if I can make that in my schedule too, for me, then I totally work that in. But then when I clock out, or that's something I'm working on, is I shut the computer, I leave it in my office. Like we don't take it downstairs. We don't check the email, that kind of thing. So working for yourself sounds really glamorous, but it's also really tempting when you are passionate about what you do because you just want to keep doing it, but it leads to burnout. There's definitely needs to be moments of rest, pockets of peace, all the things. So lots of words on that.
Yeah. And it sounds like boundaries.
Yes. Yeah. Especially if you work from home.
I think that's important for people to hear though, especially with this whole like kind of hustle culture and everything, that, it's healthy to have boundaries and healthy to have rest and healthy to have a lunch break. I mean, I work in corporate America, and like there's studies done that it's like healthier and more productive if you go take a lunch break. And so I think that it's a real thing that you should like honor. And I think that's great that you do. And I think it's good for other people to hear that you do, because I think that it can be easy to think somebody on social media or working for themselves, like all they do is like work 24/7 and they're always available. But like, that's really not the case behind the scenes, even though it may like appear that way, but that's not how, the healthiest way you manage your time.
And there's days too that I'm like, I don't need a lunch break. Like I'm not hungry, especially these days. I'm like rarely hungry being this big pregnant. I think my stomach is the size of like my fist. And like, I'm not hungry. Like I feel good. I got stamina. Like I've got the excitement to do it. But I'm like, hey, if I don't need a lunch break, someone else might need me to take a lunch break, because there might be something that comes up in my day later that I need to pause and break and do something for me right now so that I have the energy to show up for them later on. So like, I'm even learning that like my lunch breaks aren't even just for me. Like my lunch breaks are for everyone's sanity so that I can be the best Rachel after I clock out, So I'm trying to like reshift like a lot of my whys, and like, again, who I'm showing up for, and it's got to be bigger than you. So even if you're like, oh, I'm good, like I don't have to do that, like that boundary, I can break that I can break that promise to myself. I'm like, well, maybe you're breaking more promises than just to yourself. Like you're not setting yourself up for success to be the best roommate, wife, friend, sister, daughter, or whatever later tonight or tomorrow or the rest of the week. If you choose to do fill in the blank with your time today.
No, I think that that's all really good. Okay, switching gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about, I know you and Thomas walked through a waiting season with getting pregnant and everything, and now you guys are expecting baby boy to come, I think you said in March, and so you're getting very close to the finish line. This episode will come out in February, so if you're listening to this, it'll be, not too long before she has the baby. But would you mind to share a little bit about your story with that, any encouragement you might have for someone who's walking through a similar waiting season or just a waiting season in general?
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny even talking about it. And people are like, oh, I bet it gets easier to talk about it because like you have the fruit to show for it. And I'm like, no, actually, like it's still something weird to talk about because I grieve the fact that it was difficult to begin with, kind of thing. So Thomas and I decided that we wanted to start a family. Like I would say, at this point, it was probably like 3 years ago. And it came up naturally. I let Thomas bring it up. I'd always wanted to be a mom. And I know Thomas had wanted to be a dad, but I just was waiting for him to bring it up, like his timing, because I would have been a mom as soon as we were able to. And one day he did on a walk. He was like, it would be so cool to be a dad. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we started talking about what that would look like and dreaming and talking through all the things. And obviously just made a little bit more of an attempt to try and start a family. And I think Hollywood and even like growing up in my home, I just remember my parents always being like, don't sleep around, like you're going to get pregnant. And it doesn't work like that. I would hate to break it to you. It just doesn't always work like that. Even when you're adamant, even when you're married, even when you feel like you're living a life of like surrender and obedience, like things still sometimes just don't go quote unquote your way. We finally got to a point about a year into trying where I just was really discouraged. And they typically say like, give yourself a year, like your body's just trying to figure things out. So after a year, I went to my doctor and I was like, I just don't have peace about this process. And I think I need more answers. And so we did some blood work. We did lots of different tests and everything came back normal. He was like, I'm sorry, like everything looks great. You look healthy. I don't have an answer for you. And that was frustrating. Like I would almost rather have gotten really awful news just so that I could have started something, like had some answers. Like in hindsight, I think that was because I just really wanted control and I wanted the knowledge that wasn't for me at that moment. Fast forward to about a year later, still trying. And at this point, like a lot of my friends had gotten like accidentally pregnant. I had been to so many different baby showers for other people and like had to honestly learn how to celebrate other people's seasons. And it got just to a point where I was like, I just don't even know what to do. My mom ended up coming up with some like random family history. She was like, oh, you should probably ask your doctor about this. Like, this is something that our family, could be hereditary. Who knows? So I went to my doctor about it and he's like, let's check it out. Long story short, lots of science happened. They checked me out in a surgery, found that I actually had endometriosis, never even knew I had it, and cleared it up, cleaned me out, and said, we'll give you 3 months. Again, I love looking back because there's so many God winks in this whole story, because what I feel like a lot of people don't hear in this story is a lot of the pain, being reminded every month that my body isn't doing what I would want my body to do, like being disappointed, but with nobody else but myself. That was what was so frustrating, is I couldn't blame this on anything or anyone. It was just a me thing, it felt like. And now that I'm here and I'm able to look back, it's so beautiful because just even the timing of it all. I'm just going to share like a few different God winks in the middle of it. One of them, so my husband is in the military and he left for what's called officer training school back in March at the same time the pandemic hit. I had my surgery 2 weeks before he left. And my doctor, after he cleared everything out, fixed everything up, he said, basically give yourself 3 months, just have grace with yourself. And those 3 months ended up lining up perfectly with the 3 months Thomas was going to be gone. And in those 3 months, obviously we weren't trying, haha, LOL, but like I was home alone with my dog. And really it was just me and my dog, Remy, and Jesus. And we were able to pray in the middle of a pandemic, and I got peace over the whole situation. Thomas came back home and I was like, let me catch you up on where I am spiritually about this whole like mom and dad process and like starting a family. Said, I want to stop trying, quote, unquote, trying. Like, I just want it to be an us thing. Like, there's a lot to this whole infertility, trying to conceive journey that a lot of people don't know, but like, it just can get weird and awkward. And marriage ends up not being as fun as it maybe once was, because there's just a whole new level of pressure added to things. So I said, I don't want the pressure. I just want it to be us. Like, let's just be friends. Let's like figure this out. Let's just be husband and wife. And then 2 months into us just having fun, like what we said, stop trying necessarily, is when we found out we were pregnant. And I thought it was just so beautiful too that, yeah, it probably was the surgery, probably totally like fixed me. But at the same time, I think honestly too, that my heart was in a position of peace, regardless of my circumstance or outcome, and being able to surrender a place of control meant so much. So that's a very long story for how this sweet little baby came to be, who is about to be here earthside with us. And we are so excited, but it was a process, and there was a lot of waiting and confusion and disappointment and grief. And wouldn't wish it on anyone, but at the same time, we don't have the liberty and the privilege of opting out of hard things. And so really now our question is, because I can't opt out, how am I going to respond when this happens? And I just learned lots about my responses in that whole process.
I think that's a beautiful story, though, of how God like walked you through all of that. And I think that no matter what your waiting season is, whether you're also walking through waiting to get pregnant, or like me, you're waiting to, to find a husband, or maybe you're waiting for, a military, like your spouse is in the military, maybe you're waiting for them to come home, or there's a number of things people could be waiting for. Maybe it's adoption, who knows? But I feel like no matter what that season is, there's a lot of similarities in the different kind of ups and downs of grief, like you said, and disappointment, and kind of questioning God at times, or like not understanding. Is there any like encouragement that you found comfort in, or just something that you would encourage someone else in a waiting season? Because I feel like disappointment, I think, can be the biggest kind of area too of, feeling that disappointment of, okay, why is this not working? Or like, I had my hopes up and now, it feels like the rug kind of got swept up from under you. Is there any encouragement you would give people listening?
Yeah. 2 things that I heard and really took to heart, or that I would want to share with people on this side of things. One, it's not your fault. I think that like, I am such a justifier, like in my mind, I have all these spiritual equations, like, okay, because I did A and now B is going to happen, or because, B happened. I'm like, oh shoot, like, what did I mess up? What did I do? Like, how did, maybe I was disobedient and this is God's punishment or whatever. And that's not how this works. We live in a really fallen and a broken world, and God is trying to make, and he promises us this, Romans 8:28, all things, he makes all things good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose, even the dark and the broken and the disappointment things. And I think, man, how freeing it was when one of my friends spoke that over me. She was like, Rachel, I don't think this isn't because of you. Like, this isn't because of a decision you made or something you messed up or something you did in your past. This is just the way the cookie crumbled. And that, I'm sorry. Like, I hate that. This is not supposed to be this way. But because it is, and because this is reality, like, let's now take a stance of knowing how we're going to fight it, like how we're going to go through it. And that just spoke so much peace over me, because I think that, I dealt with a lot of like weird shame and guilt, and things from my past came up, and I was trying to justify and figure out why it was happening, when that's not our job. And we won't ever get answers to that sometimes. So we have to be okay with that. But the other thing is that, yes, like he works all things together for good. And that in that moment, it's probably going to make you mad to hear. And in that moment, you're going to be like, I don't know how he's going to make this good. There's no way. I say, actually, he will. And I even have other God stories. Like, we wanted to come into training pregnant. Like, that's the whole reason why we even started trying 3 years ago, was because we were about to get his next military orders, and we wanted to be pregnant when they happened. but that got delayed. And then COVID happened and Thomas got hurt. My husband got hurt. So his training kept getting delayed. And so did baby, because our desire was to be pregnant coming into training. And so how beautiful and precious God even kept that desire perfect for us. He was like, I want that for you too, but it's just going to look different. So hold on to your horses kind of thing. Like there's just so much, things are so much more complex than our sweet, cute little minds can sometimes wrap our head around. And we're going to have to be okay with not having the answers, but trusting a God who does and leaning into who he is instead of on our own understanding. Because like Proverbs says in Proverbs 3, 5-6, he's going to make our path straight when we lean on him instead of what we know and we think to be true. And a lot easier said than done, I know. But I would go back to the Rachel 3 years ago and speak that over her again and again and remind her too that your emotions are not truth. So when you feel like it's your fault, your feelings are not true. When you feel like you messed up, sometimes that's not true. When you feel disappointed, you might not actually have to be disappointed. When you feel lonely, you might not actually be lonely. We can't give our feelings the power. That's why it's so important to lean into scripture and to truth and have that more loud to us than the noise of sometimes our brains and our sweet little fleshly hearts that want to tell us other things.
Yes. That's so good. I know that will encourage so many people too, because I think, like you said, the hardest part, I think, is like releasing that control and truly trusting God. And that's even like for me with kind of my waiting season. I've been single for 6 years, going on 7 now. And I think that's been the biggest thing God has taught me is, trusting him. Like he's got this, he still sees me, even if he feels like he's silent or, not really speaking into that desire right now. He's still working behind the scenes. And like, he just like with your story, like the exact timing, he knew the exact time that, you guys were supposed to get pregnant and the exact time that the baby's supposed to be born. And I think that's the same in kind of all of our stories. And that's even the same with, the time that Jesus came to earth. Like Jesus could have come in any era in history.
That's right.
But God had a specific reason he came during the Roman era and the time in history that he did. So I think we have to kind of see that bigger picture and trust God that he's kind and he's kind to us. Because I think that's the other struggle sometimes is when waiting happens or we have these delays, it feels like, okay, God, it seems like you're kind and good to everyone else, but I don't feel that kindness and goodness to me right now. But I think it's seeing that like he's being kind for like, it says in Psalm 84:11, he withholds no good thing. And so I think that comes with trust, trusting his timing. And like you said in Proverbs is, not leaning on your own understanding, because there's no way we can understand everything and God knows what we can handle. So I think that encouragement's really, really sweet.
And I think too, it's so beautiful when we're able to be honest with him, like in those moments that we are able to say, God, I'm a little upset and I'm confused and it hurts that I have to go to this baby shower today for someone who accidentally got pregnant. And here I am like praying and like wanting this so badly. I just don't get it. Like, would you show up? Would you remind me that you're kind to me and you love me anyways? And I guarantee you, friend, like every single time, like he's shown me something that was just for me. And I'm like, that was for me. That was because I asked him to show up and he did, and he wants to. So like in those moments too, friends that are listening, like I want you to know that we have the permission to be honest with God because he knows our thoughts. He knows our hearts. He's just waiting for us to communicate and share them with him. And when we do, we're inviting him to show up in a space and to fill gaps that only he can fill and show up in.
I think that's so, so good. And another question I wanted to ask you too is just some kind of, I guess, relationship or marriage advice for anyone out there. Because I know you and Thomas both have kind of different callings, but they work well together because you're married. So it's like God gives you that, co-mission. But, Thomas is pursuing the military, you're pursuing podcasting and all of that. How do you guys kind of pursue these separate callings together? And what kind of encouragement or tips do you have for people who, you know, you're both pursuing stuff, but you both want to support each other at the same time.
This has been a fun journey. I can't wait to share this with you guys. Oh man. Okay. I had this idea of marriage before I got married that like, he was going to be a mechanical engineer. At least that's what he went to school for. I was going to be a boss babe in some like corporate marketing office because that's what I went to school for. We were going to get married, move in, start this job, blah, blah, blah. And it is, again, like so much more fun when you say yes to Jesus because he will take you on a ride. And so we've been on that ride and the ride has changed so many times. So like when we first got married, we actually moved out to California and lived there for a summer in a trailer. Fun fact. It was our first home together, a trailer for 5 months. We made it cozy. And then we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and we moved back out to California. And we did that whole like back and forth thing for about 4 years. And then, he decided in the middle of that, like, hey, I want to be a pilot. So things with that changed. I mean, yeah, you want to talk about whiplash? We've been whiplashed by our dreams, but I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. But he probably feels whiplashed by my dreams because I'm like, I want to do this. I want to do that. And there was one point in the middle of it where I got so frustrated and I sat down with a mentor and I was just so angry. It was like hot, angry tears where you're like, I don't know how this is going to work. Like I'm frustrated with him because he's choosing this. I'm frustrated with me because I want to be the wife that's like, yes, like go babe, like picks up the pom-poms and is so pumped. I'm terrified of the life he's choosing for him, which means it's the life he's choosing for me. Like I'm terrified that I'm going to have to say no to my dreams in order to like, quote unquote, submit to his. Like it just was such a confusing time. A lot of people don't talk about. And she said something so cool. She was like, Rachel, God doesn't compromise. Like he doesn't compromise anything. And when he brought you two together to do something, only you two can join together and do together. He wasn't compromising then either. So like when you think you're going in one direction, he's going the actual opposite direction. Really, it's not opposite at all. They are going to join perfectly in unity. And it doesn't mean that really you have to like, I mean, yes, obviously love is sacrifice, right? So there's things that I think it would be fun to live in New York at one point in my life. Will I probably ever get to live in New York? Doesn't look like it right now, but like maybe one day. It's like, yeah, I'm kind of sacrificing like smaller dreams, right? But as far as like my big passions, my big desires and my gifts and my talents, like God still wants me to show up for those. And same for Thomas. And because I'm a believer and because Thomas is a believer and we serve the same God and we do this thing together, it's so beautiful to see now. I keep saying hindsight 2020, right? Like now it's so funny because I'm like, when I was saying yes to the podcast, little did I know it was going to give me an opportunity to be remote, to be able to move to a new base when new trainings happen, to be able to still go and be with Thomas and his big dream chasing things. Little did he know that when he was saying yes to living a pilot life, that new opportunities for me would open up with blog stuff and traveling and campaigns. We just didn't know that this was going to be such a beautiful ebb and flow, because we were so selfishly minded in that moment. So for all of my friends listening that might be frustrated in that same hot tears moment that I was, or the idea of submission scares you, or maybe you're like, I don't even want to explore marriage because I don't want to give up what God has for me, or I don't want to give up my dreams. I'd say like, I would just say it again, like God doesn't compromise. And he wants the biggest and the best. He wants Ephesians 3:20, like to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we could ever ask or think for each and every one of us. And when we say yes, and when our spouse says yes, or when our best friend says yes, or when our partner in crime in whatever area in your life says yes, like we can link arms and we can do really cool things together. But it takes having to get some things redefined. But at the same time, like when we take ourselves out of the what is this going to mean for me moment and we say, how can I use this to serve this other person? It actually brings a lot of clarity and some cool things can happen.
I love that. And I just think that's so encouraging too, because I've never really thought of it that way, that like, you know, God's going to, when he brings you together, like he's not going to give you one dream and him the other dream so that you're constantly being pulled like away. Like he's going to work it all, as he says, work it all together for good, but he's going to like weave it so that, you know, it all meshes somehow or another, but doesn't mean there won't be growing pains along the way. But I think when we go back to what we were just talking about, like trusting him, like that looks like trusting him with your spouse and both of your callings and trusting that God's going to work all that together. So I think that's so, so cool. I love that. Okay, what is something that you are learning in this season with God? Because I know that there's a lot of transition happening. You guys moved to Mississippi this past year, and then now you're about to have a baby. So what is something you feel like God's been kind of like, plus we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So what have you been learning lately with God?
Oh, man. It's so cool, though, to be able to go through so many seasons at once. I'm very much like a compartmentalized girl. So I'm like, I want to have one season for this. And once I've done that or mastered that, then like I'll unlock the next level kind of thing. But right now, like all my levels are meshing together. Do you hear that? Okay, yeah. Wait, this has to be in your show. I have to tell you what's happening right now. So 5:00 every night.
Oh, it's the military.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Please tell us.
I like hear it through my headphones. That's how loud it is. I'm so sorry. It's going to last for about another 30 seconds because we still have the national anthem. Okay.
Oh, that's totally fine. That's
so
totally
5:00 every night on military bases, you have what's called retreat. I believe that's what it is. Oh yeah. Here's a national anthem. So those two like songs play every weekday, as long as it's not a national holiday at 5:00. So like if you're outside, you have to put your hand over your heart, obviously stand at attention, salute if you're in uniform.
Yeah.
So that's what you're hearing right now.
That's really cool. Well, meanwhile, there's church bells going off on my side.
All the music.
Because it's 6:00 here.
Love this.
All the different background noise. It's fine. I know.
Hilarious.
I love it.
It's about to be over.
Yeah, there's church bells currently happening on my end because I live next to an old church.
That's beautiful. When this first happened, I literally felt like I was in the middle of the Hunger Games. Like it feels so, it's just as weird. It's fine. It's one of the things I've yet to get used to. Also, y'all can pray because yes, baby boy's on the way. And if he's napping at 5:00 or like trying to sleep or whatever,
oh gosh, maybe one of those like sound machines will help him.
I pray.
I don't know.
I pray. Like,
I feel like babies randomly sleep through like it's like they'll sleep through the loudest noise, but then they'll wake up when it's really quiet. Like it's just when really random sneeze. What they choose to wake up to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's over. It's gone. It's done. Okay. God, what he's teaching me this season. Okay. I was going to say I love whenever I have the opportunity and life plays out this way where I have what's one level unlocked. And then after I master that level or complete it, like a new level gets unlocked. But right now, like all my levels are just merging together. So I'm like moving, becoming a parent, like learning new things in marriage, like trying to launch some projects before baby gets here, all the things. But what's so cool is the same God that I read about in scriptures that split the sea, that rescued people, that showed up in miraculous ways to people, that, came to earth and lived a crazy cool life that plenty of people, even after he went back into heaven, still continue to talk about in scriptures, is the same God who was there the day I was born, is the same God as the God that was there with me on my darkest days, that was with me through my infertility season, that will be with me when this baby is born. He is the same yesterday, now, and forever. I know that seems so simple, but it brings so much comfort, especially with how much confusion and chaos there is in the world right now, that nothing's taking him by surprise, and he is at work, and he's the author and the perfecter. He's the beginning and the end, the alpha and omega. He's all the things. And so that's something I'm learning to admire about who he is that he doesn't change, even though I do, and he doesn't change, even though this world is inconsistent. And it brings me so much more peace and comfort knowing that, I'm glad I signed up to do life with you because you're the only consistent thing. You know?
Yes. No, that's given me a lot of comfort too over the past year of just, okay, God, you're still in control. You still know what's happening and you still have the victory. So we can do this. Yes.
That's right.
And one other thing that I like to ask too, because the heart of this podcast is talking with people and just bringing people into conversations with people who are blazing their own God-given trail and inspiring others with their stories. Because I think there's just something so powerful of just, hearing other people's stories and getting to seek how they kind of got to where they are. So what's one piece of advice you want to leave the listeners with that you've kind of learned along your quote unquote trail in life, like your biggest kind of piece of advice? And you may have already kind of said it, but I'd love to just hear what your advice would be.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. I'm like, no pressure. Yeah, I would say it's so cool when you're able to not have the answers. And this kind of like pulls everything full circle, in my opinion. Like if you're in the middle of disappointment, a season of waiting, you're frustrated, confused, or whatever, like lean into that. I think it's so easy for us to want to tap out whenever we're uncomfortable and be like, I'm just going to go veg. I'm just going to go numb. I'm just going to go whatever, because I want to escape this uncomfortable feeling I'm feeling right now. But I think that really cool things happen when we lean in and when we mourn and when we go to God and when we celebrate. I would say, like, let your highs be high and let your lows be low. Like just feel it, because God has given us, man, so many cool things. But one of my favorites is feelings. He's given us our emotions, and he's experienced them himself too when he came to earth. So I think if we can be honest with who we are, what we're feeling in our emotions, it actually gives God tons of glory. And we're able to be honest and find a new level of intimacy and connection with him that I think would be an answer to a lot of the discomfort that we're feeling right now. So that's going to happen when we blaze trails. We're going to be lonely. We're going to be like weed whacking at things. Like we're going to be blazing our own, pioneering lots of cool things. But that means that sometimes things can be really uncomfortable too. That's something I would totally suggest and encourage y'all with, is lean in when it's easy to tap out.
Yeah. That's so good. So good. Okay. One thing that I love to like just end on a light note of the show, just something fun, is what are your current favorites you're enjoying right now? And what are you like loving just in general right now?
I'm loving Cheez-Its. I am living that Cheez-It pregnancy life. Thomas is like, what'd you have for lunch? I'm like, Cheez-Its. He's like, oh, well, what else did you eat today? I'm like, Cheez-Its. I mean, this baby's going to come out smelling like a Cheez-It. It's fine. But no, for real, on the serious note, I have it on my desk right now, but it's this book called Springboard Prayers by Val Marie Paper Company. I don't know if you know of her. Valerie Warner.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, people can't see it like you can see it right now, but it's a beautifully bound linen book. And they're basically prayers that you can borrow for different moments and different times of day, for different people, situations, for feelings. She even has them for a location. So like prayers that you can pray in your kitchen, prayers before a workout, a prayer for when tragedy hits, like things like that. It's so cool, because sometimes I feel like I'm speechless. Like I don't know what to say or what to pray when something happens. But it's also so beautiful too, because there's prayers for normal, mundane things in life. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forget, like I could pray about that. So if you maybe sometimes you're at a loss for words, or want to get in a discipline of becoming more consistent in prayer, then totally check out Valerie's Springboard Prayers book, because it's beautiful. It is well made, but at the same time, it's totally based in truth too. So highly suggest that.
That's so cool. I'll definitely link that in the show notes, because you guys couldn't see it, but it's a beautiful journal. So, and is that Remy?
Yeah.
Love it. Is there anything you want to like promote or share with our listeners that you have coming up? I know the baby's coming up, so you'll be going on maternity leave before too long, but anything that you want to make sure that everybody knows about, whether it's coaching or the podcast, whatever.
You're sweet. Yeah. If y'all wanted to join me on Behind the Bliss, you could listen along on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Just search Behind the Bliss podcast. But then also, I just would love to connect with y'all. Like, let me know who you are. Hop on Instagram, shoot me a message, be like, I listened to you and Courtney's episode. Like, would love to say hey. You can find me on Instagram at Rachel Awtrey, or rachelawtrey.com is where you'll find tons of archives of like funny things from lots of stories I've told on here and more. Just love to collect different things over there. And then whenever you go to rachelawtrey.com, there'll be a fun little pop-up that says like, hey, here's an opportunity to get 10 free quiet time resources. So if you love hearing fun recommendations from people, totally put in your email and download that. It's for free. It's just for fun. But I'm sharing some of my favorites that have helped me in my walk with the Lord. that make things more fun, more beautiful. Like the book I just shared, that should be on the list. It's not, but it's things like that I would love for y'all to have access to. So head over to rachelawtrey.com to get access to that.
Yay. Well, everyone be sure to go and connect with Rachel. She's amazing. Rachel, thank you for being on the show today. It's been such a joy talking to you and catching up and just hearing all about life lately. So thank you.
Yes, it's been such a treat. Thank you for having me, Courtney.
Wasn't that conversation just so encouraging? I'm so grateful that Rachel was on the show because I know I needed to hear some of what she said as well. And it was really encouraging for me too in my own waiting season. Be sure to hop over and connect with her and check out the show notes for all the links that we talked about in today's episode. And if you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed to the show. And also, if you wouldn't mind, we would love if you could leave a review and help us out by making sure that more people can find out about the Trailblazer Talks. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode, and we'll see you guys